Hello, my name is Robert Thompson, and I am giving my demo lesson. You have to excuse the size of my whiteboard. I know it's quite small, but I think it should do a good job of showing that I can use a large one in a classroom setting. So, without further delay, I will begin. So today we're going to be going over the early history of man, and specifically the time before writing was invented. And the thing about the time before writing was invented is that we really don't know what was going on. There was no one there to write it down. There's no documentation of what was going on. The best we can do is get these little glimpses from these artifacts and these bones and try to fill in the gaps ourselves. And this is what many archaeologists and anthropologists do, is they look at these old items from these old times and try to fill in the gaps of what was going on at the time and what life was like. One thing we do know for certain is that there were several different types of humans on the evolutionary path to the modern human, which is what we are. And we're going to be looking at some of these humans today, and we're going to be seeing the steps they took and the changes that they made, and how they really paved the way for modern humans. And we're also going to be looking at some of the societies they made and how those early societies really did lay down the groundwork for a lot of things that we have today. And yeah, let's get into it. So, humans have existed for millions of years, but writing has only been around for about 5,000. So there's a large gap of time there where we don't know what was going on. There's no writing about it. And what we call that period of time before writing was invented, we call prehistory. Prehistory is the time before writing was invented. And there's really not much that we know about it. Like I said, we can get artifacts and bones and tools, and we can look at them and try to fill in these gaps, and I think we've done a good job of it, but at the end of the day, we don't know 100%, but that's what we study when we're trying to study prehistory, is the artifacts and the tools and the bones from the time. And two of these archaeologists who have definitely made great strides in that area are Mary Leakey and Donald Johnson. And they both made discoveries about these early humans. And early humans are what we call hominids. Hominids are early humans. So Mary Leakey and Donald Johnson made a discovery about these hominids. Mary Leakey in 1995 discovered a skeleton in Africa that was over 1.5 million years old. And that being, we now know today, is what is called Australopithecus. And it is one of man's oldest ancestors. And Donald Johnson discovered it in the 60s. He discovered a skeleton that was over 3 million years old. And looking at this, it just shows how long humans have been around and really how little of it we have written down. Really only 5,000 years out of millions of evolution and of humans. And we can study some of these beings and study their development to see how we got to where we are today. So specifically, I would like to talk about two different hominids today. The first of which is Homo habilis. Homo habilis, also known as the handyman. And he was called the handyman because Homo habilis was the first hominid to make and use his own tools. A tool is any item that has been modified for human use to make a task easier. That's what a tool is. And Homo habilis was one of the first ones to do that, to make his own tools, not just to pick up a rock and use it, but to change the rock to suit what he needed. So actually, the earliest tools that Homo habilis used were rocks. They were rocks about the size of my fist, and on one side they were sharp, and on the other side they were rounded for better gripping. And that was one of the all-purpose early tools that Homo habilis used. It was probably very all-purpose. It was probably a suitable weapon. Could process foods, could break open nuts with it. It was one of the first tools, but what's so remarkable about it is that Homo habilis was thinking about it. Homo habilis was saying, I need a better tool to use than just your standard rock, so I'm going to make one sharper, make my own tool. And that's that was a huge step in human development. And really those early tools, just the simple rock, the sharpened rock, really set the groundwork for what would later be things like the axe and the spear. And next I would like to discuss, as my second hominid, is Homo erectus. Homo erectus, or upright man. And as the name suggests, one thing that was notable about Homo erectus was he walked upright. Now, Homo habilis was much more hunched over, much lower to the ground, much more like an ape. Homo erectus stood like us, up on its two legs. And this really does have a lot of implications on our evolutionary development. First of all, two legs, that will give you a superior sense of balance. It'll give you better running because you can run just with your leg. You can run with your legs, longer legs. The longer legs we have means bigger strides. And also it frees up your hands for hunting and for using tools. Many apes will run almost with their hands, running with their hands on the ground, but Homo erectus did not do that because he stood upright, so he could use his hands. And second of all, one of the most important things about Homo erectus is that Homo erectus knew how to create and control fire. Prior to this, humans had just relied on the naturally occurring, a brush fire, a lightning strike. But with the advent of being able to make fire and use it to their advantage, Homo erectus made this great jump in technology. Suddenly they could cook food. Sickness was much less of a concern because of that. When conditions were harsh, they could build a fire and give themselves warmth. It really was one of the most important things about Homo erectus is that he could do fire, which really laid the groundwork for a lot of the technology that we would develop later. So anyway, we have Homo habilis, the handy man who made tools, Homo erectus, the upright man who could stand up and could do fire, and that brings us to today, modern humans, what we are as Homo sapiens. So Homo sapiens. And the biggest thing about Homo sapien means wise man. And the biggest thing that separates Homo sapien from Homo erectus is the size of our brain. Homo sapiens actually have about a 25 to 30% larger brain than Homo erectus did. We have a lot more thinking power, which is where we get the name wise man from. And so from Homo sapiens, we can now start to look at history and how societies were formed, because this was when people really started to think like we do now. So, anyway, early history, as we can see it, is broken into 3 parts. And each of the parts is named after what the tools were made out of at the time. So, early hominids used stone tools, so they existed in the Stone Age. That's pretty basic. The first part of the Stone Age is something known as the Paleolithic era. The Paleolithic era. What's interesting about the Paleolithic era is that it was the longest era out of any that's ever existed. In fact, the Paleolithic era started at the beginning of time and went up until about 10,000 years ago. So it was billions of years long. And through the Paleolithic era, there were some very, very primitive tools, like I mentioned earlier, Homo habilis with his rock. But that rock also gave way to strides in technology that were developed in the Paleolithic era, such as the axe and the spear. Now the axe was very important because it allowed man to harvest lumber. This could be used for fire or for shelter. Also, the axe gave man a way to skin animals to get furs. So once again, it's really coming back to these important survival matters that these tools evolved through. And the spear was a very important invention because it allowed man to hunt better. First of all, the spear could be thrown from a distance. Man didn't have to get that close to animals to kill them anymore, which really increased the safety of hunting and extended the life of a lot of men. And then also it allowed, because of this throwing and because of its range and its reach, it allowed men to hunt larger animals. Suddenly animals like deer, horses, mammoths, you could hunt these. And that really opened up a lot of options for men for food. Which is going to bring me right into societies. So, with tools and hunting down, people started to form societies. A society is a group of people bonded together by a similar culture. And the general culture of what these ancient societies were going to be was hunter. We call them hunter-gatherer. They were hunter-gatherer societies. And what hunter-gatherer societies were is actually quite simple. You had the men who would go out and they would hunt animals. And the women would go out and they would gather nuts, berries, fruits, seeds, anything that was edible that you could gather, and they would watch over the children. And that was how people contributed to society at the time. It was all about getting food. And everybody contributed equally to that goal, whether you were a man or a woman, when you were hunting or gathering. That was what the main goal was getting food to survive. And so once you get once these societies developed and you had these people living together and they were hunting and gathering together, what they then later developed was, what developed out of those society bonds was language. Language developed suddenly. And that spawns a lot. It's not really certain about what language came about for. A lot of people say it was to share hunting ideas or to settle disputes over who would get the most food from a hunt, or to strengthen relationship bonds so that people could talk to each other and form relationships and feel closer. I don't know which one is right. I'm sure they all have some legitimacy, but the fact is that once people started getting together and living in these societal bonds, they started to talk to each other and work together. And then out of those societal bonds as well, as people were talking, we also developed art. Art also developed out of these societies. Cave paintings that are millions of years old that people wanted to share from these times. Once again, we don't really know what they were trying to communicate. Some people say they were hunting instructions. Some say they had religious ideals. I don't really know, once again, but either way, it's that you had these people who were thinking a lot, and that's where Homo sapien gets their name, the wise man. Homo habilis gave us the tools. Erectus walked upright and he gave us fire, and Homo sapien, the wise man, thought. That's what he did. He thought to get together. He thought to make language, and they thought to make art. And we've really used a lot of these things, these tools coming along, and this technology from Homo erectus and how they crafted stuff, and we've used those. Homo sapien has taken those base blocks and really just blown it out of the water. It's just we've built enormous cities and wonderful cultures, and I think we definitely have a lot to thank our ancestors for that. So, I mean, that ends my mock lesson. I hope it was satisfactory, and I hope to hear back from you all soon. So, thank you very much.